I came home from a brutal 16-hour shift to find my wife gone and our entire life savings, $28,000, completely drained from our account. She left a note saying our marriage was over, but she had no idea what she'd actually stolen from me. What would you do if the person you trusted most betrayed you so completely, yet had no clue about the secret that would change everything? Something was wrong the second I turned my key in the front door. 16 hours at the steel factory had left my back screaming and my hands raw, but I pushed through the pain because tonight was special. Tomorrow marked 3 years since Sarah and I moved to Riverside Heights, and I had plans. Big plans that would change everything. The house felt different, empty in a way that made my skin crawl. Usually, Sarah's music played softly from the kitchen speakers. Her coffee cup would be sitting by the sink, lipstick marks on the rim. Her reading glasses would be folded on the counter next to whatever romance novel she was devouring that week. Tonight, silence pressed against my eardrums like water. I called out her name as I dropped my work boots by the door. Nothing. My voice echoed back from rooms that suddenly felt too large, too hollow. Walking through our living room, I noticed gaps on the shelves where her favorite books used to sit. The family photo from our wedding day was gone from the mantel. Even the throw pillows she bought last month had vanished. My heart started beating faster. In the kitchen, a white envelope leaned against the coffee maker. My name was written across the front in Sarah's careful handwriting, the same script that used to leave me love notes in my lunchbox. Inside, a single sheet of paper held words that knocked the air from my lungs. I cannot pretend anymore. This marriage is over. Do not look for me. Do not call me. I need to start fresh somewhere you cannot find me. Sarah. The paper fluttered to the floor as my hands began shaking. This had to be some kind of joke. We'd had dinner together 3 nights ago. She'd kissed me goodbye when I left for my double shift yesterday morning. Sure, we'd been stressed about money lately, but every couple went through rough patches. I grabbed my phone and dialed her number. Straight to voicemail. Her cheerful voice telling callers to leave a message felt like a slap. Racing upstairs, I threw open our bedroom closet. Half empty. Her dresser drawers gaped open, cleaned out except for a few old t-shirts she never wore anymore. The jewelry box her grandmother gave her was gone. So was the suitcase set we'd bought for our honeymoon. This was not a spur-of-the-moment decision. This was planned. My phone buzzed with a text from the bank. Your account balance is now below $10. Visit our website to avoid overdraft fees. Blood rushed in my ears as I opened the banking app. Our joint savings account showed a balance of $3.47. 3 years of careful saving. 3 years of me working overtime every weekend. 3 years of skipping dinners out and buying generic groceries so we could build something together. Gone. All $28,000. Withdrawn yesterday at 2:15 p.m. while I was sweating through my shift, dreaming about surprising her with the vacation I'd been secretly planning. I sank onto our bed, staring at the transaction history. Withdrawal after withdrawal over the past 2 weeks, amounts carefully kept under the daily limit to avoid triggering bank alerts. She'd been bleeding our account dry while looking me in the eye every morning, asking about my day, pretending everything was normal. The woman I'd shared a bed with for 3 years had been planning her escape while I planned our future. But something nagged at me as I scrolled through the transactions. The timing was too perfect. The amounts too calculated. This level of planning required help, advice, maybe even encouragement from someone else. Sarah was smart, but she'd never been good with money or details. She forgot to pay bills, mixed updates, needed me to handle all our financial planning. Suddenly, she was executing a complex financial exit strategy with surgical precision. I called her sister Emma, hoping for answers, praying this was all some terrible misunderstanding. Jake. Emma's voice was cautious. Is everything okay? Sarah's gone. She cleaned out our savings and left. The words felt foreign in my mouth. Long pause. Too long. Emma, did you know about this? Another pause. She called me yesterday. She said things between you two had gotten really bad. That you were working all the time and never talked anymore. We talked every day. She said you'd grown apart. That she felt like she was living with a stranger. The words hit like physical blows. I'd been working extra shifts to save money for our anniversary trip to the mountains, the same place we'd honeymooned. I was planning to tell her we finally had enough saved to start looking at houses. All those extra hours were for her, for us, for the life she said she wanted. Emma, where is she? I don't know, Jake. She wouldn't tell me. She just said she needed a fresh start somewhere far away. After hanging up, I sat in our empty bedroom holding the note, reading it over and over. Each word felt deliberate, chosen. This was not the rambling, emotional outpouring of someone making a desperate escape. This was a farewell written by someone who'd already moved on mentally weeks ago. Something else bothered me about the bank withdrawals. The largest ones happened during my longest shifts, when I wouldn't be checking my phone or thinking about money. She'd known my schedule better than I knew it myself. My wife had not just left me. She had calculated every detail of how to hurt me most completely while protecting herself from any consequences. But as I stared at that devastating bank balance, one thought kept surfacing through my shock and grief. Sarah had been so focused on taking what she thought we had, she never bothered to learn what we actually had. She had no idea what she'd really done. Dawn came too early, but I'd been awake all night anyway, staring at the ceiling and trying to make sense of my new reality. The coffee maker felt enormous as I prepared a single cup, the sound echoing through rooms that now seemed built for a family I'd never have. Everything reminded me of Sarah. The kitchen table where we'd planned our budget. The couch where we'd watched movies every Friday night. The empty spaces on the walls where her paintings used to hang. I needed answers, and I needed them today. Starting with the obvious, I called Sarah's workplace. Her manager Rebecca sounded surprised to hear from me. Sarah requested emergency family leave last week, Rebecca explained. She said her mother was sick in Oregon and she needed to help with medical care. Is everything all right? My stomach dropped. Sarah's mother lived 20 minutes away and was perfectly healthy. We'd had dinner with her parents the previous Sunday. When did she request this leave? Monday morning. She seemed very upset, said it was a family emergency that might last several months. Sarah had been planning her exit for at least a week, creating cover stories and building alibis while I worked myself to exhaustion trying to provide for our future. Next, I drove to our bank branch, hoping face-to-face conversation might reveal details the app couldn't show. The manager, a middle-aged woman named Carol, pulled up our account history on her computer. Her expression grew concerned as she scrolled through the recent activity. These withdrawal patterns are unusual, she admitted. Multiple transactions just under the daily limit, all made during business hours when joint account holders typically coordinate large movements. Did my wife say anything when she made these withdrawals? Carol hesitated. I cannot share specific conversation details, but I can tell you that she presented proper identification and knew all the security information. The transactions were legitimate from a banking perspective, but suspicious from a marriage perspective? I've seen similar patterns before, Carol said carefully. Usually when one spouse is preparing for divorce proceedings. Divorce. The word hit me like a punch. Driving home, I noticed our neighbor Dave washing his car in his driveway. Dave worked from home and saw everything that happened on our street. If anyone witnessed Sarah's departure, it would be him. Hey Dave, did you see Sarah leave yesterday? Dave's expression shifted uncomfortably. Actually, yeah. Around noon. She had help. My blood chilled. Help? A guy in a black sedan. Looked expensive, maybe a BMW or Mercedes. They loaded several boxes and suitcases. Seemed like they knew each other pretty well. What did he look like? Tall, probably 40-something, wearing a business suit on a Tuesday afternoon. They were talking like old friends, laughing about something. I figured maybe it was her brother helping with some errands. Sarah's only sibling was Emma, and she lived 3 states away. Dave, how well did they seem to know each other? Well, Dave glanced around, lowering his voice. My wife mentioned seeing them together before. At the grocery store a few weeks back. Jennifer thought it was odd because Sarah introduced him as a work colleague, but they were shopping together like a couple, picking out steaks, wine, that kind of thing. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Sarah had not just planned her financial escape. She had planned her romantic escape too. Back inside, I opened our laptop and began searching through files I'd never felt the need to examine before. Sarah's email account was still logged in, a level of trust that now felt naive. Her recent messages painted a picture I'd been blind to see. Emails with someone named Richard discussing dinner reservations at restaurants I couldn't afford. Conversations about weekend trips that happened during my overtime shifts. Messages about feeling trapped and ready for a real life with someone who appreciates me. The timeline was devastating. While I'd been working 16-hour days to save for our future, Sarah had been building a different future with someone else. One email thread made my hands shake. Richard, I think he's starting to get suspicious about the money. Maybe we should move faster. Don't worry about Jake. Focus on getting everything transferred before he realizes what's happening. Once you're clear, we can start fresh in California. It feels wrong taking everything, But I've earned this after 3 years of living like a college student while he plays at being a provider. You deserve better than what he can give you. We both know that. I printed every email, every conversation, every piece of evidence that showed this was not a desperate escape from an unhappy marriage. This was calculated theft disguised as relationship problems. My phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Jake, it's Sarah. Her voice sounded smaller than usual, careful. Where are you? That doesn't matter. I called because I heard you might be thinking about making this difficult. Making what difficult? You stole our money and disappeared. I took what I was entitled to as your wife. That money was as much mine as yours. The lie was so smooth, so practiced, that I realized she'd been preparing for this conversation too. Sarah, I have copies of your emails with Richard. Silence. Then, what emails? The ones where you planned this whole thing. Where you talked about moving faster before I got suspicious. Where you laughed about me working overtime while you built a life with another man. Jake, you're misunderstanding. I'm understanding perfectly. You've been planning this for months. The question is whether Richard knows he's dating a thief. You cannot prove anything. I can prove everything. Emails, bank records, witness statements. Your boyfriend helped you move stolen money across state lines. That's federal. Another long silence. What do you want? I want to understand why you decided to destroy 3 years of marriage instead of just asking for a divorce. Because divorce means splitting everything 50-50. This way, I get to start over completely. Her honesty was more shocking than her betrayal. She had never intended to leave me with anything. She had planned to take everything and disappear, leaving me with bills, heartbreak, and no resources to rebuild. But Sarah had made one critical error in her planning. She'd been so focused on what she could see in our joint account, she'd never bothered to ask about money she couldn't see. Money I'd kept secret because I was planning the biggest surprise of our marriage. Money that changed everything she thought she knew about our situation. Money that meant she'd stolen far more than she realized, and stolen it from someone who was not nearly as helpless as she believed. My father-in-law Robert was standing on my doorstep at 7 in the morning, holding 2 cups of coffee and wearing the grim expression he usually saved for bad business news. We need to talk, son. Robert had been a divorce lawyer for 30 years before retiring. If he was here with coffee and that look, Sarah's betrayal was about to get much worse. Come in, I said, stepping aside. Though I should warn you, your daughter cleaned out our savings and ran off with another man. I know. Robert handed me a coffee. That's why I'm here. We sat at my kitchen table, the same one where Sarah and I had planned our budget every month, dreaming about the house we'd buy someday. Robert pulled out a legal folder thick with documents. Sarah called me yesterday, he began. She wanted legal advice about protecting assets during divorce proceedings. She seemed to think you might try to claim more than your fair share. I almost laughed. More than my fair share of money I earned? Here's what's interesting, Robert continued, opening the folder. She asked very specific questions about inherited property and whether spouses have automatic claims to family money. She wanted to know if you had any assets she didn't know about. My blood turned cold. Sarah had been fishing for information about money she suspected existed but couldn't find. Robert, what did you tell her? Nothing useful. But her questions told me everything I needed to know. He pulled out a sheet of paper. This is a list of every question she asked. Take a look. Reading Sarah's questions was like watching someone try to crack a safe. She'd asked about inheritance timing, asset protection, hidden accounts, and property transfers. She knew I had money somewhere, and she was trying to figure out how to get to it. She specifically asked about your grandmother Rose, Robert added. Said she'd seen some mail with Rose's name, but you'd never mentioned any inheritance. Grandmother Rose had passed away 4 months ago, leaving me everything in her will. The farmhouse, the land, and investments worth more money than Sarah and I had ever dreamed of having. I'd kept it secret because I wanted to surprise Sarah on our anniversary with the news that we could finally afford the life she'd always wanted. Instead, she'd been planning to steal what she thought was everything while I prepared to give her actual everything. Robert, there's something I need to tell you about Grandma Rose's will. His eyebrows shot up as I explained the inheritance. The properties, the investments, the life-changing amount of money that Sarah had no legal claim to because it came to me individually after our marriage. Son, this changes everything, Robert said slowly. If Sarah took money from accounts that contained inherited funds, even mixed with marital assets, she's committed a serious crime. What kind of crime? Felony theft, possibly federal charges if she crossed state lines with stolen property. And if this Richard character helped her? Robert whistled low. Conspiracy charges, potentially. I showed Robert the printed emails between Sarah and Richard, the bank statements, and the timeline of their planning. His lawyer mind went to work immediately, scanning documents and taking notes. "This is a prosecutor's dream case," he said. "Clear intent, documented planning, substantial amounts, crossing state lines. But there's something else you need to know." Robert pulled out his phone and showed me a social media profile. I did some research on Richard Morrison after Sarah mentioned him. Look at his recent posts. The profile showed a man in expensive clothes standing next to luxury cars, posting about business deals and investment opportunities. But the comments told a different story. Angry clients talking about missing money. Former business partners warning people to stay away. "Richard is a con artist," Robert explained. "He targets women in unhappy marriages, promises them better lives, and uses their money to fund his lifestyle before disappearing. Sarah isn't his girlfriend. She's his latest victim." My anger towards Sarah suddenly mixed with something unexpected, concern. She betrayed me completely, but she was walking into a trap with a man who would destroy her financially and emotionally before abandoning her. "There's more," Robert continued. "I called a private investigator friend who's been tracking Richard for months. He's wanted in 3 states for investment fraud. Sarah didn't just steal from you and run away with another man. She stole from you and handed the money to a professional criminal." The irony was devastating. Sarah had calculated every detail of her escape plan except the most important one. Richard Morrison was playing her exactly the way she'd played me. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we document everything and call the police. But Jake, I need to ask you something important. Do you want to press charges?" I stared out the window at the yard Sarah used to tend, the flower beds she'd planted with such care, the life we'd built together that she'd thrown away for a fantasy. "She made her choice," I said finally. "But I won't let her destroy herself completely." Robert nodded. "There might be a way to handle this that protects you legally while giving Sarah a chance to undo some of the damage. But it depends on finding her before Richard disappears with your money." "How do we find them?" My investigator friend thinks they're headed to California. Richard has a pattern of moving his operations to new states when heat builds up. If we can locate them before they cross into California, we might be able to recover your money and prevent Sarah from becoming Richard's next bankruptcy victim. I thought about the woman I'd married, the woman who used to laugh at my terrible jokes and fall asleep reading romance novels. That woman seemed like a stranger now, but she was still a person who'd made terrible choices rather than an evil person making calculated moves. "Robert, what if we could catch Richard without destroying Sarah's life?" "It's possible, but it would require Sarah's cooperation. She'd have to admit what she did and help us build a case against Richard." "Would she do that?" "Depends how much she loves him versus how much she fears going to prison." My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Jake, it's Sarah. We need to meet. Something's wrong with Richard. Please call me." Robert and I looked at each other across the table. Sarah's perfect escape plan was falling apart faster than she could have imagined. "Looks like we're about to find out," I said, reaching for my phone. But before I could call her back, Robert grabbed my wrist. "Wait. If Sarah's realizing Richard isn't what he seemed, this could be our chance to get everything back. But we need to be very careful about how we handle this." The next conversation would determine whether Sarah remained a criminal or became the key to stopping a bigger one. Sarah's voice shook so badly I could barely understand her when I finally called back an hour later, after Robert and I had planned exactly what to say. "Jake, thank God you called. Richard took the money." "What do you mean he took the money?" I kept my voice calm, even though my heart was racing. "All of it. Every dollar from our account. He said he was investing it in some business deal, but when I asked to see the paperwork, he got angry. Really angry. Then this morning I woke up and he was gone." I looked at Robert, who was listening on speaker and taking notes. He held up a finger, signaling me to keep her talking. "Where are you now, Sarah?" "Some motel outside Phoenix. Richard said we were stopping here for one night, but he never came back. I found a note saying he had to handle some emergency business and would be back soon. That was 2 days ago. Do you have any money?" "About $60. "Jake, I think I made a terrible mistake." Robert scribbled a note and slid it across the table. "Ask about the timeline." "Sarah, when did Richard take our money out of the account you transferred it to?" Long pause. "How did you know I transferred it?" "I'm not stupid." "When did he take it?" 3 days ago. He said it was temporary, just until his business deal closed. He showed me documents, official-looking papers about some real estate investment. It seemed legitimate." Robert was already typing on his laptop, checking something. He showed me the screen. Richard Morrison's latest arrest warrant from Nevada, issued 4 days ago for investment fraud. Sarah, I need you to listen carefully. Richard Morrison is a con artist. He's wanted by police in multiple states for stealing money from women just like you. That's impossible. He owns businesses. He has money. He has money because he steals it from people who trust him. The FBI has been tracking him for months. Silence on the other end. Then, quietly, oh my God. What have I done? Robert wrote another note. Tell her about the inheritance. This was the moment I'd been dreading. Sarah had stolen from me, betrayed me, destroyed our marriage. But she was stranded in Arizona with no money and no way home, realizing she'd been played by someone who made her look like an amateur. Sarah, there's something else you need to know. The money you took from our savings account? Some of it came from my grandmother's inheritance. What inheritance? Jake, you never mentioned any inheritance. Grandma Rose left me everything when she died. The farm, her investments, enough money to buy the house you always wanted and never worry about bills again. I was going to surprise you on our anniversary. I heard her start crying. How much money? More than you can imagine. More than enough for both of us to live comfortably for the rest of our lives. Jake, I'm so sorry. I thought we were broke. I thought you didn't care about our future. I cared enough to work 16-hour shifts saving money for a surprise vacation while you planned to steal everything and run away with another man. Robert held up a new note, offered to help, but set conditions. Sarah, here's what's going to happen. My father-in-law is here with me. He's going to help us figure out how to get our money back from Richard and keep you out of prison. Prison? You committed felony theft when you took inherited funds. But if you help us catch Richard and return what you can, we might be able to work something out. I'll do anything. Jake, I know I destroyed everything between us, but I'll do anything to fix this. Robert took the phone. Sarah, this is your father. I'm going to ask you some questions, and I need completely honest answers. Your freedom depends on it. For the next 30 minutes, Robert questioned Sarah like the experienced lawyer he was. He got details about Richard's real name, the fake business documents he'd shown her, the timeline of their relationship, and most importantly, the account information where Richard had moved our money. Here's what we're going to do, Robert finally said. Jake and I are driving to Phoenix tonight. You're going to help us find Richard and get that money back. In exchange, Jake won't press charges and you'll get a chance to explain your side to a marriage counselor instead of a judge. Really? Jake, you'd do that for me after what I did? I thought about my answer carefully. Sarah had betrayed me in the worst possible way, but she'd also been manipulated by a professional criminal who'd done this to other women. Her choices were terrible, but they came from feeling trapped rather than pure greed. I'll help you get out of this mess, I said. But Sarah, our marriage is over. When this is finished, we'll file for divorce. You'll get what you're legally entitled to from our marital assets, but nothing from the inheritance. I understand. Jake, I know you'll never forgive me, but thank you for not letting me go to prison. After hanging up, Robert and I spent the evening planning our trip to Arizona. He contacted his private investigator friend, who was already tracking Richard's movements through credit card usage and social media posts. Why are you helping her? Robert asked as we loaded his car. Most men would want revenge after what she put you through. I thought about that question as we drove through the night toward Phoenix. Sarah had destroyed our marriage and stolen our savings, but she'd also been the woman who brought me coffee in bed every Sunday morning for 3 years. She'd been wrong about almost everything, but she'd been right about one thing. I had been working too much and not communicating enough about my plans for our future. Maybe if I'd told her about the inheritance earlier, she wouldn't have felt so hopeless about our situation, I said. That doesn't excuse theft and adultery. No, it doesn't. But it helps me understand how someone I loved could make such terrible choices. Robert drove in silence for a while before saying, You're a better man than she deserved, Jake. Maybe. But I'm also a man who learned that keeping secrets, even good ones, can destroy a marriage just as much as telling lies. By the time we reached Phoenix, I'd made peace with helping Sarah escape the consequences of trusting Richard Morrison. She'd still face the consequences of betraying me, but she wouldn't face them alone and helpless in a strange city. Some mistakes deserve punishment. Others deserve lessons. The trick was knowing which was which. But first, we had to find Richard and get our money back. And according to Robert's investigator friend, Richard Morrison had made his own mistake by staying in Phoenix longer than usual. He had no idea we were coming. The Phoenix police detective hung up his phone and turned to us with the expression of a man who just solved 3 cases at once. We found him, Detective Martinez announced. Richard Morrison checked into the Desert Vista Resort under a fake name, but he used the same credit card he's been using to steal from other victims. My team is moving into position now. Sarah sat beside me in the police station, her hands shaking as she signed witness statements. For hours earlier, she'd been just another victim. Now she was the key to stopping a criminal who'd stolen from dozens of women across multiple states. What happens when you arrest him? I asked. That depends on whether he still has access to your money, Martinez replied. Morrison is smart. He usually moves stolen funds through multiple accounts before disappearing. But this time he made a mistake. Martinez showed us printed bank records on his desk. He's been using your stolen money to pay for everything: hotel rooms, expensive dinners, even a new car. Every transaction creates a paper trail leading back to the funds he took from your wife. Sarah winced at the word, wife. We were still legally married, but that felt like a detail from someone else's life. The good news is that electronic transactions can be reversed if we act fast enough, Martinez continued. The bad news is that Morrison knows this. If he realizes we're closing in, he'll withdraw everything as cash and disappear. How do we make sure that doesn't happen? Robert asked. Your daughter-in-law is going to call him. All eyes turned to Sarah, who looked like she might be sick. What am I supposed to say? Tell him you need money for gas to meet him somewhere. Act normal, like you still trust him. We need him to stay put for another 2 hours while the financial crimes unit freezes his accounts. Sarah pulled out her phone with trembling fingers. What if he knows something's wrong? What if he can hear it in my voice? Then we lose him and your money, Martinez said bluntly. But if you can convince him everything's normal, we can end this tonight. The detective stepped out to coordinate with his team, leaving Sarah, Robert, and me alone in the small conference room. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Sarah finally spoke. Jake, I need you to know something before I make this call. I looked at her properly for the first time since we'd arrived in Phoenix. She looked older somehow, worn down by stress and the reality of what she'd done. The confident woman who'd cleaned out our savings had been replaced by someone who understood the real cost of her choices. I wasn't just stealing money from you, she said quietly. I was stealing the future you'd been building for us. The house, the security, the life you worked so hard to give me. I threw all of that away because I was too scared to tell you I felt invisible in our marriage. You felt invisible? You worked so much, Jake. 16-hour days, weekends, overtime whenever it was offered. I know you were doing it for us, but it felt like you were choosing work over me. When Richard started paying attention to me, making me feel important, you decided to destroy everything instead of talking to me? I decided to run away instead of fighting for what we had. Sarah wiped her eyes. I was a coward who chose the easy wrong over the hard right. Robert leaned forward. Sarah, that's all very touching, but right now we need you to focus on getting Jake's money back. She nodded and dialed Richard's number. The phone rang twice before his familiar voice answered. Hey, beautiful, where have you been? I've been worried. Sarah closed her eyes, steadying herself. Richard, I'm sorry I didn't call sooner. I've been so tired, and this motel doesn't have good cell service. Well, good news. The business deal closed early. We can leave Phoenix tonight and drive to Los Angeles. I'll pick you up in an hour. Actually, I need a favor. My car is almost out of gas, and I only have $20 left. Could you send me some money so I can fill up and maybe grab dinner? Long pause. What happened to the cash I left you? I had to pay for an extra night at the motel when you didn't come back yesterday. Richard, is everything okay? You sound different. Everything's perfect, baby. Better than perfect. This deal is going to set us up for life. Sarah looked at me with something like hope in her eyes. Richard was still talking like a man who had money to spend, which meant he hadn't realized the police were tracking him. So you can send me gas money? She pressed. Of course. I'll wire $200 to that Western Union location you passed on the way to the motel. Pick it up in 30 minutes and then pack everything. We're driving straight through to California tonight. Richard, I love you. The words hit me like a slap, even though I knew she was acting. I love you too, Sarah. After tonight, we'll never have to worry about money again. She hung up and immediately started crying. I hate myself for saying that. You did great, I told her, meaning it. That bought us the time we need. Detective Martinez returned with news. Morrison just tried to transfer $50,000 to an offshore account, but we froze everything 2 minutes before the transaction processed. He's trapped. What about the Western Union transfer to Sarah? We're letting that one go through. When Morrison shows up to confirm Sarah received the money, we'll arrest him. Sarah, you need to be at that Western Union location in 20 minutes. Will I be safe? You'll have surveillance teams watching every entrance. Morrison won't get within 50 feet of you. As we prepared to leave for the Western Union office, Robert pulled me aside. Son, I'm proud of how you're handling this. A lot of men would have let Sarah face the consequences alone. Maybe they would have been right to do that. Maybe. But helping someone who hurt you shows the kind of man you really are. Watching Sarah walk into that Western Union office, knowing she was about to help catch the man she'd thrown away our marriage for, I realized something important. Sarah had made terrible choices, but she was trying to fix them. Richard had made terrible choices and was still making them. The difference between someone who makes mistakes and someone who chooses to be a criminal isn't the size of their errors. It's whether they try to repair the damage or keep making it worse. In 30 minutes, we'd know which category Richard Morrison really belonged in. But I already knew which category Sarah belonged in, and surprisingly, that knowledge didn't hurt as much as I'd expected it to. 6 months after Richard Morrison was arrested in a Phoenix Western Union parking lot, I stood in the kitchen of my new house, watching snow fall outside windows that Sarah would never see. The house was everything she'd dreamed of during our marriage: wraparound porch, big kitchen, enough land for the garden she'd always wanted to plant. I'd bought it with money from Grandma Rose's inheritance, the same money Sarah never knew existed until it was too late. My phone buzzed with a text message. Jake, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted you to know the divorce papers came through. Thank you for everything. Sarah had kept her promise to help the police build their case against Richard. Her testimony led to his conviction on federal fraud charges, and the evidence she provided helped them track down money he'd stolen from 11 other women. Because of her cooperation, the prosecutor dropped all charges against her. I never pressed charges either. The money Richard stole was returned through asset forfeiture when the FBI seized his accounts. Every penny of our original savings came back, plus interest and penalties that Richard had to pay. Sarah received exactly half of our marital assets in the divorce settlement, just as the law required. She got nothing from the inheritance. Last I heard, she'd moved back to her hometown and taken a job at a bank. Emma told me Sarah was seeing a therapist and working to understand why she'd made such destructive choices. She was trying to rebuild her life the honest way this time. Robert stopped by every few weeks to check on me. You ever think about dating? He asked during his latest visit. Sometimes, but I'm not ready yet. Because you're still angry at Sarah? Because I'm still learning from what happened with Sarah. The truth was more complicated than anger. Sarah's betrayal had taught me that trust, once broken, doesn't heal just because the legal issues get resolved. But it also taught me that forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. I could forgive Sarah's choices without rebuilding a relationship with someone who'd proven capable of such calculated deception. More importantly, I learned that working 16-hour days to provide for someone doesn't mean much if you're not also present for them emotionally. Sarah was wrong to steal and cheat, but she wasn't wrong about feeling alone in our marriage. My new routine was different. I still worked hard, but I also called my parents every week, had dinner with friends, and took time for hobbies I'd neglected during my marriage. I was building a life that didn't require another person to validate its worth. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. Detective Martinez stood on my porch, holding an envelope. Thought you'd want to know, he said, stepping inside. Richard Morrison was sentenced yesterday. 23 years in federal prison. Good. There's something else. He asked to speak with you. I raised an eyebrow. What could he possibly have to say to me? Martinez handed me the envelope. He wrote you a letter. You don't have to read it, but he insisted I deliver it personally. After Martinez left, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the envelope. What could a convicted con artist have to say to one of his victims? Finally, curiosity won. I opened the letter. Jake, you don't know me, but I destroyed your marriage and stole your money. I'm writing this from my cell because I want you to understand something important. Sarah never stopped talking about you. Even after she thought she was in love with me, she talked about your work ethic, your kindness, your plans for the future. She regretted betraying you from the moment she did it. I convinced her to go through with it anyway because I needed her money. The truth is, she loved you more than she ever loved me. She just didn't know how to fix what was broken between you two, so she ran away instead. I'm not asking you to forgive her. I'm telling you that she destroyed something real for something fake, and she knows it. That's a punishment worse than prison. Richard Morrison. I read the letter 3 times before folding it and putting it in my desk drawer. Richard was right about one thing. Sarah had destroyed something real for something fake. But he was wrong about something else. The punishment wasn't worse than prison because punishment wasn't the point anymore. The point was learning to build something real again, by myself this time, without needing someone else to complete it. Spring came early that year. I planted a garden where Sarah would have planted hers, growing vegetables I'd share with neighbors and friends. The house filled with laughter during dinner parties and quiet contentment during evenings spent reading by the fire. Sometimes I thought about what might have happened if I told Sarah about the inheritance earlier. If I'd worked fewer hours and communicated better. If I'd noticed the signs of her unhappiness before she decided to act on them. But mostly, I thought about the future I was building now, one based on honesty instead of surprises, presence instead of provision, and trust that had to be earned rather than assumed. Sarah had taught me that love without communication is just two people living parallel lives. Richard had taught me that some people will exploit any weakness they can find. I taught myself that starting over doesn't mean starting from nothing. It means starting from everything you learned the hard way. The inheritance that Sarah never knew about became the foundation for a life she'd never be part of. Sometimes the best revenge is building something beautiful from the ashes of betrayal. And sometimes the best forgiveness is letting someone live with the consequences of their choices while you live with the rewards of yours.